I think we're ready to go then. Well, welcome everybody that's made it this far to the fourth and final episode of the Albuquerque Santa Fe evaluation Zoom preps. Tonight we're going to the Sandia Mountains for track and sign, mostly a few tracks. Upcoming the prep days on October 23rd, Tingley Beach to October 24th. We'll figure that out when we know where we can't go. And then the evaluations. And then we now have a new setting for November 2nd, 2024, 9 a.m. Up at Randall Davy, hosted by Ann. And the details are on the website.
New Mexico Tracking Club.
New Mexico Tracking Club, yes. All right, so let's start with what we're not likely to see. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but very unlikely to find any of these where we're going in the mountains. For some reason, porcupines just don't like it. I don't know why. Maybe they don't like the food up there, but we have never seen one on our camera at the center, and I've never seen tracks. Same thing pretty much for badgers. There probably are some, but we just never see them. They never show up on the cameras. And then prairie dogs. There's some pockets of prairie dogs now in the mountains. They've started showing up. Usually a little lower, flatter than where we're likely to end up, but it's not impossible to see a prairie dog village. Red fox still haven't quite shown up in the Sandias. They may one day. Now raccoons are there. They're just really rare. Very seldom do they show up on our cameras at the center. I think I've seen one raccoon track in the last 12 years hiking around up there. Same for roadrunners. They like low sandy places. We don't see much of them. And spotted skunks. I've only seen one track anywhere in the mountains in the last few years, and they never show up on our game cameras. So I'm not expecting them. None of these are impossible, but unlikely, low priority, I guess.
Mike, what kind of skunk tracks were that we saw up there
Right.
with Maggie?
Striped skunks are everywhere. They just live everywhere. They're very happy. We've got one next door. But these little spotted guys, they're a lot more they hide. They don't come out. They don't seem to like people very much. So I've just kind of stopped expecting to see it. I mean, it could happen, but they look very different. They're much smaller and different. So if you see what looks like a weird little skunk track, it might be one of them, but that'd be low on my list of options. All right, so this is what's been done. Now, this is based on evaluations done over the last few years up there. I may not have all of them because I missed in the spring, but this is pretty close. There's a lot less up here than there is down in the Bosque, just because there's not as many places for tracks and so forth. But as you can see, if you know your deer, turkey, and bear, you're in pretty good shape because that is a huge amount of things. They just so much track and sign left behind by them. After that, there's a lot less you might see. Wood rats and red squirrels are very common. Yes?
Oh, I just had a question. When you say thrashing under deer, do you mean antler thrashing? Is that what you're referring to there?
Rubs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clarifying. Or rubs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you know your deer, you're in good shape. Turkey, bear are very, they just leave a lot. So if this is a good list to work off of, some of these I expect we might see, but I can't tell you how many are likely to show up. And it's not complete. Every time they find something new and cool, I would expect to see something unexpected. So let's go to the mammals, mountain lions, tracks and scat. Very seldom do I see scat. I don't know about you, Ann, but I think we've seen 2 times that we felt like we found mountain lion scat because they usually hide it. But the tracks are more common. We often see them. If you get any kind of good substrate, it's not uncommon to find them. And often they're walking along the trails and using the trails, and that's where the tracks appear.
Yeah, as far as the scat, I would say the only places I've seen their scat is either at a kill site or at a scrape that I was sure that it was lion scat.
Well, we've seen it twice on trails,
I mean, this right here, I don't know. Where was that?
Yeah, we see it so often or we see it so seldom that I just don't even expect to see it anymore.
I was just looking at that and wondering if it was bobcat scat, honestly.
It'll be a big old bobcat, that's for sure.
There are some big old bobcats out there.
Yeah. And there's some bobcat up there, but the ones we've seen are more commonly like regular size. And we saw once on a trail where there's no question that it was was a mountain lion, but it's just really rare. But the
Yeah.
tracks, yeah, I would not be surprised to see tracks. And the bobcats are everywhere, and they leave lots of tracks, and they leave lots of scat. And I would definitely put them on my list of maybes because they're just kind of everybody, everywhere from low down up to the top of the mountain. As far as I can tell, they live everywhere.
You want to describe that track for people who don't know?
Well, it's asymmetrical, huge pad. The toes are teardrop, and there's lots of space. And this is one of those you can't draw an X through it. It doesn't work for everything, but on a bobcat track, it works fine. So if you see them and it's complete, it's kind of just a bobcat track, and the size is way bigger than a house cat, so it's hard to confuse the two.
So it has like 3 lobes on the bottom and 2 on the top.
Well, it does, but like even on this one, you can see is there three lobes? It looks like two, but
It
we
looks
know
like
there should be.
it
There's
looks
two
like
up
another
here.
track on top or something. There's a little
Yeah. So this one's, they're not always, you don't always get all three. I mean, if you get all three lobes on the bottom and two on the top, like we did on Saturday, that's like a good day. But this overall pattern with the asymmetrical and lots of space between all the toes, big C shape here, that's kind of bobcatish.
Yep.
All right. So coyotes, they're everywhere. Not a lot of tracks in the mountains, though. Not good substrate. Don't often see them. They can show up if you've got a good spot, maybe with a little mud or some undisturbed sand or something. But I very seldom see them, and I hike the same trails where they live. Um, in fact, I was up there yesterday, and I just don't see them. But this we do see, and I got to thank Kim for her extraordinary collection of coyote scat. So I see this every day. Any day we go up in the mountains, we're going to see it. Long, twisted, kind of there's often fur and other stuff in there. It can be any kind of food, whatever they're eating. The one Saturday was full of, I think, grapes, maybe. And sometimes they're all nothing but gray fur if they've been lucky enough to maybe get a squirrel or a bunny or something. But placement's big, middle of the trail, often at a high point, and hard to miss. And we have the gray fox tracks once again, hard to see up there, not a lot of them. They spend a lot of time in the trees, and they're very light little creatures. So you got to have good substrate to get a fox track because they don't seem to leave much. And it's just like almost looks like a little cat, but it's got these little claws, and the toes are tiny, and there's a huge amount of space in there, often fur, if you can see fur in there.
Right, and the heel pad's tiny compared to those toes, right?
Yeah, and sometimes there's none on the hind foot. Sometimes there is no pad, so it's just four toes. I think the one we saw some good
Bless
fox
you.
tracks on Saturday, and there was one or two that just there was no pad on the rear foot at all. It's that there was the animal was so light it just didn't make one. So gray fox, don't see their tracks, but we see their scat everywhere all the time. I consider them the true scat artists of the animal kingdom. They leave it in incredible places, high on the top of a rock where you can't imagine they could balance. They put it anywhere and everywhere they can. They put it on top of other scat. It can look for a variety of it, but a lot in the mountains is black. It's just dark. It almost looks like they've been eating oil or something. Sometimes it's just a splat, but it's almost always somewhere on a trail if you hike for any distance, especially on rocks. They just love rocks.
So how do you tell the difference between that and coyote? Is it the
Well,
amount?
the amount, I don't see that dark black on coyote very often. They don't seem they have a better diet, I guess, or more variety. Gray fox do eat other things; they're omnivores, but they seem to eat a lot more meat. And boy, so you get those dark ones like this one down here. This thing just looks like a pile of black goo, and this one is actually in an intersection of three different trails in the mountains, like the epicenter of all three trails, perfectly placed. So I think they're more likely to put it on a high place, sometimes a very obvious place.
But
Coyotes
coyotes do
do,
that too, right?
but not with the same verve. I don't.
You
You know,
know, you can
But
tell
it's-
kind of by the diameter, can't you? Like,
yeah, they're
Yeah,
much smaller, but you
I
can
think
also, you know,
also you got to take into account the volume, not just the diameter. Just imagine the size of a fox. Like Casey was saying, imagine picking up a fox compared to picking up a coyote, and imagine the volume of scant that can come out of that animal. Think about
Yeah.
I feel like the volume of gray fox scat is kind of more like a house cat volume.
yeah,
Coyotes are much.
and it's often just one or two little blobs. And then I
Mhm.
feel like I'm looking at a fox. If it's just a couple of little black blobs on a rock, I don't see a coyote ever doing that. And then striped skunk, they're everywhere. We saw some last month when we went up to the center, passing through in a nice little muddy spot. And they're nothing that looks quite like it. They're just about the size of your thumb, five toes, long claws. And if you get a really good one, you get this crease on the back, on the hind foot here. Although I must admit, I don't see that as often. Um,
That's a great
yeah,
picture of the long claws on the front, though. Wait, go back
it
one.
is. Yeah,
That's a
no,
good one.
this is pretty
The
good.
left
This is
side,
Jonas.
that left side track being the front track. Those claws are
Yeah,
super long. That's awesome. This is Jonas, did you say?
yeah, that's one of Evan. It's got his, and this is kind of it's not diagnostic, but it's pretty good evidence of a striped skunk. They lope a lot. You know, the one we found a couple like last month, perfect lope going along. So I think this is also a pretty good indication. If you see this and you can find five toes, I'm thinking, and it's about the right size. I'm thinking, I'm
you
starting with.
you want to describe lope? Like, how
Yeah,
would
sure.
somebody who
So
doesn't know
yeah,
identify?
so it's you want to do this, Ann?
Sure. I mean, I can't really do the pointer here, but in that
Okay,
left photo with the knife, yeah, starting from the bottom.
right. So this one,
Right. So you can see that one by the long claws that that's up front. And usually in the lope, it's like you're going front
yeah, it's like
hind, going from
front,
bottom to
hind.
top to top. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
And
got
this,
left front, right hind, left. Wait, am I right? Left,
yeah, that's right. It looks like.
left. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
always using my left and right in a picture. Never mind. I won't even.
Yeah.
Front hind is the main thing, and then you just look for left and right. You just look at the left and right, which is on the left, which is on the right.
And it's a group of four. Here's four. This is an actual 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there will be a small gap, and then another group just like this.
Right, right, yeah.
So it doesn't
Yeah.
look like it doesn't look like anything else. It really doesn't. And it's not like they're moving that fast. They just seem to walk this way.
It's just kind of like that little thing that they do, when you see them walk like this. That's
Yeah.
because they're loping. That's why they do that.
And mule deer, this is going to be a big part of the wherever you go because there's so many of them now. Cat, usually ask, it's an easy question, but no. Capsules, sometimes one end is a little flatter than the other. Nothing else looks like it, and you never see one. There's always lots and lots.
You want to talk about the difference between deer scat and rabbit scat?
Sure. Rabbit is much smaller and they're round. These are like capsule shaped. They're a little bigger, and there's often a much bigger pile. It's hard to imagine a rabbit leaving a pile the size of this, maybe given time, but and it's not uncommon to see this a lot of these in one place. Same with the rabbits, but they're just smaller. And sometimes
If
the
you
rabbit
did,
ones are a little on the green side. You know, they get a little greenish. These guys, they don't seem to happen so much.
if you did see a whole bunch of rabbit like this in one place, you would probably also see a whole lot of rabbit feeding sign of something they were feeding on
Yeah.
right there that was really yummy for a long time or repeatedly.
And
But
there's usually one question about this. It's an easy question, but they usually ask it because they happen
Mhm.
the one I've been to. Then deer bed. These are easy to find. There's a lot of deer beds in the mountains. This one's in the Sandia Mountains. This was from the one you did, Ann.
Mhm.
And it's not deep. It's just kind of scraped out shallowly, and it's on a hillside. So where this person is from her down, it slopes down. They seem to like a view where they can see the predators coming. So this is in a kind of it's not open, but it's semi-open. There's a little shade, and then if you look in here, sometimes often you will find little bits of fur, and it's deer fur if you bend it and it kinks and stays. And then all around here, although it's hard to see in the picture, there's just a lot of little deer scats. Not like that pile before, but just a few. And then sometimes if you really get lucky, you might find the front, a couple of long indentations there, although I've never really seen that as well from the front feet.
Oh yeah, or the back leg too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can see like the curve of the
Yeah.
back, a
It's
long
like
back.
it's like a lima bean. That's what I think. He's looking at a lima bean kind of shape. So this is probably the back end of the deer. It's looking that way, and it's not laying down. It's actually up on it's like it would be at elbows and knees if it was us, but for deer it means they're pretty much on the ground.
Yeah, I think they also like being on that hillside because like the thermals will rise and fall, so they also get scent
Yeah,
um
and
by sitting there. It'll just go past them in the wind.
and there's more than one. There's this one, and then in the same location, I think we found two others within 30 yards probably,
Right.
because there's a lot of deer and they all want their own spot. So, and then these we found like a week ago, I think, up on Ellis, off of Ellis,
Wow.
deep grass, and
Nice.
just a big lay. They've been laying here. And this is the spot, and this is a hillside. Once again, it's got a great view. And often these things up there are right on the trail, which I realized it gives them an even better view and an escape route. But
Where's
this,
Ellis? Where is that?
yeah,
Ellis is just past 10K. It's
Yeah.
before you get to the crest.
Okay.
Really close to the crest parking lot, but not all the way up.
Nice.
and there's a series of big meadows with deep grass like this, and almost all of them have just a bunch of these deer beds in there.
Cool.
Hunking, I haven't seen it yet on eval, but I'm hopeful. This is when they hop. And this is kind of what it looks like. Wish I had better pictures. This is up at the center. This is the beginning of the pronk. There's a series of these. And it's two hinds, two fronts going that direction. And then there's a big gap between these and the next four, because the pronk gets them moving pretty fast. So I don't know, 4 to 6 feet in front, there'll be another pattern that looks just like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
this
maybe, oh,
yeah.
I don't know if you were gonna say, but that's very specific to mule deer. It's one way if you're in the zone where whitetail and mule deer overlap, which is not exactly here, it's a little further east, but then you know if you see this, it's not whitetail.
And if Casey finds this, I bet we'll get it on a question,
I bet we will.
because it's just cool. And then okay, this one, if he can find a good
Nice.
good examples, then he's going to front. And the key is these little like vestigial toes down here, front point out, the hind point more or less forward. But you need either deer moving fast or going through mud or both to really get a good example of this, I think. And there's a lot of good spots in the Sandias where I think you could find this, because we've had good luck. Sherry and I were looking a couple of years ago when I was doing one of these tracking things, and we found a lot of deer tracks where we could do this.
Yeah.
And then deer rubs,
Nice.
pretty common. There's a couple of them. You can probably help me here, Ann. They're usually like it's a chaotic attack on a thinner branch. They're usually thinner. Often it has to be kind of open. Like if you see this and it's in the middle of a bunch of branches, there has to be enough space for a deer to walk up to this, bend its head over, and whip its antlers back and forth. And so they need some openings. And then
I was just gonna add to that, if you see it a place where there's not an opening, but you see a bunch of broken branches, then they like made the opening. That can happen.
Yeah. And this might be this one over here. It's like they probably had to do some damage to get in there. But this one's perfect because it's just isolated. And there's usually, they don't go all the way to the ground, because there's no point in that. But if you kind of imagine a mule deer leaning its head down, so it's looking at the ground and whipping its antler back and forth, this is about as far as low as they're going to go. So the height is a clue as well.
Are you going to show us? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's hard to see maybe in these, but when you look at it up close, like, and I'm sure you could see if you zoomed into these, but like what you can see is that the material of the bark is both like scraped up at the top and scraped down at the bottom, which is different from if they were like eating the cambium with their bottom teeth like that. Then it would only be scraped up to the top, and it wouldn't be scraped down because they don't have any top incisors. So that's a question sometimes people have.
Yeah, and there was, you guys, last time you had one where there was a question, it might be an elk that had done it, Cher, was that right?
Mhm.
Yeah, the last eval.
Yeah.
And I really don't know how to tell the difference.
Well, I mean, it's height really more than anything.
And there's not a lot of elk in the Sandias, that's for sure. They live there, but they're very rare.
Mhm.
And they're small. They're small elk. Big for a deer, but nothing like the ones you see up in Shama.
Right.
And here's the mule deer feeding sign, often on prickly pear.
Wait
This
a
is
minute,
another
can
one
we
of
go
Shama's.
back to the deer for a second?
Sure.
And Anne was saying that the difference between eating and rubbing is that at the bottom,
Sure.
it,
So right here, it would be cut. And up here, it would be torn.
if it was what?
If
If they
it's,
were foraging.
yeah, if they're foraging, they would cut from the bottom and tear up to the top.
So
Yeah,
then
and
it would be all ragged up at the top.
Right. Like that
Like-
one. I didn't add that picture today. It didn't turn out as well. I didn't. We found one today. It was classic, but I didn't get it on the slideshow today. I may have one coming. I'm
Right
not
here,
sure.
but right here, you can just see how it's ragged both bottom and top.
Yeah. This one. And
And most often, this is what you're seeing, especially
Sure.
if it's happening when the tree is old, you know.
yeah, it looks like an 8-year-old boy with a bat went after it or something. I may have one.
I'd always think it looks like somebody went after it with like a rasp and they just took it up and down like
Oh,
this.
yeah. And so this is mule deer feeding sign. It's not hard to find up there. It's all torn. This one's a little easier to figure out because it's got to be in a place where a deer's head will fit. They don't go down on the ground. They're not going to fight their way into a prickly pear. They're going to eat the ones that are easy to get to.
Would
And they
you,
leave all these strings just hanging off.
do you want to talk about the formation of the mouth and why it looks like that? I mean,
Yeah,
you
they have
kind of
teeth
got
on the
into it
bottom
last
and
time.
a plate on the top, so they can't cut like a rabbit or a rodent. So they can cut. This would be the bottom probably, cuts in, and then they tear to get it off. Because
And
they
that
can't.
leaves all those that leaves all
Yeah.
the thread-like pieces, which you
Yeah.
wouldn't see when a rabbit's feeding.
So
Yeah.
you can see this is the teeth cutting in, and then on the back is going to be pushed up against the plate, and they just pull their head up and tear it off. And another indication is they do a lot. Like you can see they really savaged this one, and then this one has got a huge old bite in it. Looks like another one here. So sometimes I've seen these prickly pear where they're almost gone. I mean, if the whole thing is accessible, they might eat, 78% of it.
Do you have a
Yeah.
picture of the rabbit sign of that too later?
I don't know that I do. No, we still haven't gotten back to a lot of rabbits yet, unfortunately. They're
But
coming
yeah,
back, but they're still pretty rare.
I did see that in the spring though. That was on the eval.
Yeah.
Was some
I think
rabbit.
I think they might have been on the earlier ones in the bosque, maybe, but I can't remember. I don't remember for sure. And here's browse. These are Kim Cabrera, and they're torn. This one, it would, if that was a rabbit, it'd be like a 45-degree, sharp as a knife right there. This one is a good one because you can really see the damage that was done by tearing that top of that plant off. And this is everywhere. I mean, we had it on the last eval. I've had it on every eval I've ever done anywhere, frankly, because deer are everywhere and they eat a lot. And this is going to be high. It's not going to be at the ground level. But it can be 6 inches. It can be 3 feet. I mean, 4 feet. Depends what they want off the plant. And this is one I like. It looks like one I saw in one of my first evals. It's just a weird kind of pile of deer poop. It doesn't look like the others, but it's because of what they're eating. I guess is a heavy load of some kind of vegetable that creates this. But it's a deer scat. It's just a weird looking one. And if you think, it's like a lot of little poops piled on top of each other that came out that way.
It's like when they're eating really succulent stuff, right? You
Yeah.
can kind of see actually in the top left there by the ruler. I don't know if you can point to that,
Now
where
this-
it's the pellets are squashed together there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
up there.
I saw one in the first eval we did up at Tree Spring, I think. Yeah. There was one of these on the ground. And I was like, what the heck is that? But there was lots of other deer stuff around, so that helped a little bit. All right. And here's a deer run. This isn't a great picture because it's not in the Sandias, but they're everywhere. I mean, absolutely everywhere. There's so many deer and they go back and forth all day long and they make these trails. And they're, 5 to 11 inches wide. They're narrow, pretty well worn with sharp edges, although not always. Depends on what they're walking on. There's just a lot of stuff on the ground. I won't do that. And they can go under unbelievably little things. So if you see one and there's like a barbed wire fence or something, don't discount a deer because they can get under stuff pretty easily or go through it.
Yeah, and if it's barbed wire, look for the hairs.
Yeah. And then this is new for us. We have a new dog. This is Cosmo here.
Mm.
He's still kind of a puppy, but he has been finding deer bones like I wouldn't believe. So every time we go on a hike anywhere in the Sandias, he finds deer bones, often multiple deer bones. And they're all like this one right here on the top. This is right on the trail. I mean, we walked past this and didn't see it, but he smelled it. That is a classic rear leg deer bone. This one he dug up. It was buried and he found it. And I think this might be a radius, but this end is kind of beat up, so you can't be for sure. But there are deer bones everywhere apparently, and now we find them every time we hike. So I think if you went looking for deer bones, you could find them.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah,
can you explain what that sticky out bone is that you circled?
I
up
don't know
there?
what that is. It's just an anatomical feature. I'm not sure what it does.
I think
I
it's
could,
called the calcaneus, I believe, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
what does it do? It's just fun. It's a fascinating thing, and not all very few animals have it. Apparently, ungulates have it. And
Yeah,
it's
I think, I mean, it holds muscle on it, obviously, but
I
I don't
was
know.
thinking
Exact-
must be an attachment for some serious muscle though.
Mhm. Yeah, if you looked further in that joint, that's where that astragalus bone is that people use for divination.
Really? In here?
At that joint. Yeah.
Oh, really? And this one was a lot easier for us to figure out because it's just a deer bone. I mean, there's nothing else that looks like that, the size and everything. But Sherry found a pelvis. You guys found one up at 10K too, right?
A pelvis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Found a pelvis yesterday.
Yeah, we did. We found a lot. We found a whole bunch of them.
And here's one that they tripped. They actually brought in, Kevin brought in an elk haunch back leg to ask this question. But if you find a deer leg and the question is, which leg is it? I mean, if it still has the hide on the side, the inside, this didn't print very well. Inside is a lighter color, so that is lighter than that. The front legs bend back like our back legs, and the back legs bend front. And so it's an interesting kind of, if you can figure out which way you're going, like if there's still a hoof on it, you can probably figure this out, whether it's left or right, front or back. And with an elk, there's an elk at the center. There's a very few of them, but they do come through,
Oh,
and their
nice.
tracks are just different. Man, they're huge, they're rounder, they're heavier, they're deeper. Um, they just they don't look anything like a deer. In fact, they look more like a cow sometimes, if depending on the presentation. So, but they're huge. Like this one over here that's a 6 inch long. That's a double imprint, but it's still about 6 inches long. The ones up in the center are pretty small. And their scat is big. It's a big old deer scat, but looks a little different. It's kind of like a little misshapen, kind of. I don't know, maybe because it's so heavy, but we might see it. It'd be a rarity to find them up there, but they are there. And then the guys who do most of the work up there to create track and sign are the bears. This is one of the big bears sleeping at Mud Springs or hanging out at Mud Springs on a hot day. For deer beds or bear beds, if you look around, they are around. They're not as common as deer beds because there's a whole lot less bear than deer, but they have a tendency to really just dig them up. So they're deeper and there's a lot more movement of stuff. And often, like can't see it in here, but over just out of the picture is a big old bear scat. So if you see this kind of combination, and they really like a nice shady, comfy spot.
And
They
what's
don't
the
care.
shape like, Michael? What can you say about the shape compared to deer?
Well, they don't seem to have a consistent shape. I mean, we saw one that was kind of oval, really beautiful oval. This one is just kind of a chaotic round. And then there was another year where this thing was shaped like this. And so it went around like that. I haven't seen a consistent shape. Maybe you can
Maybe
tell us more about that.
that's interesting. Maybe that was multiple beds, because what I've seen is that the ones that I've seen are all basically round.
Yeah, well,
But
the one we had last at the center was perfectly round. But this one actually, they come back here every year and make this, and it's different every year. I'm just kind of, maybe there's, like you say, maybe they're using it one after another, and every
yeah, it
bear
could
was
be.
a different configuration. I don't know. But the
Yeah,
size, the depth, and there's often scat nearby.
definitely.
And then tracks. Okay, so there are often bear tracks. They really like to use the trails. If there's any, if it's a good surface, you'll get them because they're so heavy. So, and we've got hind and front. And the biggest problem with these guys is that they're reversed from us. The little pinky is on the inside instead of the outside. So you have to reverse your thinking to get a bear track left and right. So the hinds are big and they got a big foot pad, like a heel, like we do. And the fronts are much smaller in terms of the pad. It usually looks just like that. And usually the hind is on top of the front because they have a tendency to do that. So you may get both. But the hard part is remembering that you have to have the pinky on the inside. And then you go left and right. And Sam, one of the guys that we were trying to sort this out, he just takes his hands and reverses them like that. And then he matches. And that works because they're exactly the opposite of us.
Right, because the thumb is their smallest digit.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird, and that means that they've got these just giant toes, and then these little ones down here. So often when I see them, I just see this. This disappears, and I've got four giant toes, and based on that, it's either a bear or a person wearing barefoot shoes, and it's usually a bear. Okay, and here this is so common. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see this. This is a bear foraging, and he's turned over this rock. I'm going to guess this rock is over 100 pounds, maybe 150 pounds. He didn't have any trouble turning it over. And the weird thing is, this is very seldom dug. They flip, they look, and they move along. I've only seen a good dig on. I think whatever it is they're looking for is obvious, and if they don't see it, they go to the next rock. But they love the tracks. Bears are lazy and efficient, so what they do is they walk along human tracks and flip rocks. Sharon and I went on a hike during COVID when the bears came down, and there must have been 30 or 40 like this flipped on this trail within a mile. And then bear digs. Nothing looks like this. So this is also up at the center. This is huge. That's my pole. It's about 3 feet long. And so you can see the size. This is a good 6 or 8 inches deep. And this one's a little older. And there's going to be 3, 4, 5 of these on the hillside, all about like this. And then here's another one. You can't really tell, but there must have been an animal that he was after in here because he went deep on this, and actually he tore off all of this wood trying to get into whatever was in there. So it's just like a rototiller, somebody with a rototiller in the woods, and that's a bear because nothing else can do this kind of damage. And there's scat all over. It looks,
kind of insects too. Who knows?
yeah. It looks different. It can be all kinds of colors and contents. This is a pretty average looking one, but I actually have seen them. I've seen white ones, black ones. There's even like sometimes they have little splats, but there's so many splats that no other animal could possibly produce them. So it's kind of volume, and they don't really place them wherever they poop. They poop. So if it's on a trail, if it's off, it doesn't seem to make any difference to bears. And hair and scratches. They love telephone poles. So we've got this nice little, this is a blonde bear, at least that part of them. And then these are nice little scratches. So these are probably 4.5 feet off the ground. This is probably more like 3.
Nice.
And then Aber squirrels, only in Ponderosa. They can go into like fir forests, but they much prefer the Ponderosas. And they are busy creatures. They cut the top off the Ponderosa. This is new fresh growth, usually at the very end, the very top. This is going to have a 45-degree cut almost always. And then the part that was be here is now here. They cut that off. They cut it off of this end, and they eat this like a corn on the cob. You get this look. Here you can see the little teeth mark in there, clean as a whistle. When they're fresh, they're white, and then they turn gray. And you might see this pile. This is every one of these is an Aber squirrel eating, and they're still doing it. I was up there yesterday, and they're still doing this. So
Casey calls those lucky sticks.
well, I know, or magic sticks.
I have one on my dashboard for luck.
Do you? Yeah, they really do it heavily in the spring, but they're still going strong. I found a bunch up there yesterday, so I know they're working it. And then the southwestern red squirrel. Let's see if this works here.
Mike, to get the sound, you have to enable sound on your PowerPoint.
Oh, forget about it. It's not worth it. But it's just a loud chirping, chattering noise. It sounds angry because it is. They want you to go away. But these guys, they're above 7,000 feet. They don't really like the Ponderosa forest so much. They really like fir forests all the way up to the top of the crest. But especially around, I don't know, 8, 9, 10,000 feet, they're everywhere. And they leave so much cool stuff. All right, here's a red squirrel midden. This thing is huge. It goes all the way around here and over here. And if you're in red squirrel land, you will know it. They just leave these everywhere, and you'll hear them. You'll see this. There's other things. So
can you describe what that is?
Oh yeah, this is the end product of stripping a bunch of pine. I'm forgetting the word here. Not pine cones. So they collect the pine cones.
Isn't it Douglas fir there?
Yeah, this is Douglas fir here, I think. But they also like to live in. I noticed the cork bar fir seem okay for them. Yeah, but the heaviest are definitely the Douglas fir. So they strip the cones, and they just drop the what's left, and it's often red like this because that's the color of the cones. And it could be deep, it could be a little pile, it could be a big pile, and there are a lot of them because each squirrel has a little area, and they work and they come back over and over and over, and they usually leave little spots where they're eating. And these are often on the side of the trail. Like this is right on the side of the trail that was cut through. This is on the side of the trail, and I think they like sitting there because they can see you coming. We often see them sitting there. So depending on the time of year, there's a little pine cone. In the spring, you'll find flowers left over, whatever they don't eat on the flowers here. Sometimes in the fall, you'll see mushroom pieces. Whatever they eat, it's just kind of sitting there.
Yeah, and that's different from like mouse or small rodent sign, right?
Because the quantity is huge. I mean, this is a big tree.
I'm
this
just
tree
trying
is
to say that mouse or small rodents would be feeding under cover. Because you were mentioning how they're on top where they can see, and squirrels tend to do that, like chipmunks.
Sure. And then you get so much of it because like this tree is probably 2 or 3 feet across. I mean, that's a huge amount. And we've seen trees that had this going for 30 feet up they just produce so much of this stuff. And then here's a rubbing site, and they like to rub their cheeks have what do you call it, the scent in them, and so they rub it off, they chew it off, they make it smooth, and they rub it. Yeah.
But those also are bite marks where next to the ruler, right?
It's hard to tell. I went back and looked the other day, and I couldn't really tell, but this thing's been there a long time. It may have been rubbed for 10 years, whatever.
I mean, that looks like bite marks to me, but
yeah, it could be. And I've seen them doing the rubbing thing sometimes where there really wasn't that much effort put into it. They just kind of a spot, where they pick. Let's see. Okay, the gray rock squirrel. He lives everywhere, from the river, the top of the mountain. Not in the forest much. They don't like the forest. They like it open. So if you see tracks, there's only three options in the Sandias: red squirrel, rock squirrel, or Aberts, and they don't look anything alike. So you got two tree squirrels with straight toes, Aberts and red, and then you got the rock squirrel with the curved toes, like that, because they dig. These guys climb, and these are so much bigger than these. Big fat toes, little thin toes. And I don't see much of these except in the winter. They just don't seem to leave a lot of them on the trail. Rock
Yeah.
squirrels, on the other hand, yeah, they're on the ground running around, so we might see them almost anywhere that's open. They're likely to be there. Okay, and there's a vole run.
Oh, nice.
They do run around and they cut this. This is, I don't know, this isn't very deep. Maybe an inch. I don't know. It's pretty small. They're little guys, and they work through here. And sometimes if you follow them, you find a hole in the grass. I found them, but I don't have a good picture of one. So if you were to follow this, maybe here you might find a hole. That's kind of their burrow. It's kind of like a little round hole.
Mm.
But you need some pretty good grass. It has to be open from what I've seen anyway. And pocket gophers, obviously, they're everywhere. They leave little holes like this, different sizes, different shapes, often a little top thing there where they sealed the hole after they finished pushing all the dirt out.
I
They're
have a
everywhere.
question about the voles. Can you
Sure,
go back one?
sure.
Because I'm not familiar with voles. Is that trail like a tunnel underneath, or is it
No,
open? What
it's open.
open?
So
Okay.
you can see right there, you can see the bottom. And they run it over and over. I don't think they dig it so much as just kind of wear it down. So, and they love grass. If you're in grass, think vole. Also hispid cottonrat, apparently. They're kind of like big voles, what I understand.
They do dig. Sometimes they dig those like under the snow.
Yeah. Then you get a different look of it. Which just leads us to okay, well, we're not this guy. But anyway, we've got the holes, they're everywhere, every size. There can be multiples. They love soft soil, especially on hillsides. And they live everywhere from the river to the top of the crest. And they will leave eskers, which in the spring are everywhere. What they've done is they've gone through the snow and they push the dirt into the tunnels in the snow. When the snow goes away, this survives. The rain usually gets rid of these, but you can find them year round in certain places if it's protected and if this is really well packed. So we might see an old esker. They just look like this. They're just burrows up above ground basically. And every once in a
So
while, yeah.
they're not burrows above ground though, because they're solid, right? It's just a
Well,
debris
yeah.
pile.
Well, they were a burrow, but then they filled it, right? And the debris sometimes, if you look like this one, it seems to be just dirt. But every once in a while, you'll find one that's just packed with scat, and that was
Yeah.
like a special, you know, location, I guess, that they packed it into. But
So the burrow was in the snow. Is that what you're
right,
saying? And
they were
then,
in this.
so
They were
there was a
burrowing through the
tunnel.
snow. And they pushed the dirt up from underground where they start, and these things don't usually go very far. And then when they're done, they move on because they're always packing the dirt behind them, and then the snow melts away and reveals what's left that of the dirt that was packed into the snow. Does that make sense?
It's kind of like a cast of a tunnel. That's how I think of it, right?
Yeah, cast of a tunnel, exactly. And I looked yesterday, I couldn't find any down low, but up higher, they may last a long time, especially in the dense forest. All right, turkeys, they are very busy up there. Um, there were some running around yesterday. Maggie saw them. I see them pretty regular, and the tracks are everywhere. I saw lots of tracks yesterday. They also like to use the trails and just walk along the trails. And there's no other bird in the Sandias that looks like this. There's no sandhill cranes. There's no large wading birds. So big old track like that, it's just going to be a wild turkey. And there's a lot of scratching. They scratch everywhere. and they're shallow, different sizes. They don't dig. I don't know. It's more like having a little rake, I guess. Their claws are like little rakes, and this one you can't really see, but there's actually right there is I think one little claw mark. Sometimes you can see them, sometimes you can't. And then scat, a lot of scat up here today, yesterday too. And so you got the male is it has a J shape because their body has a J shape where this comes out apparently. And the female is just a pile. Looks like this, but in a pile. Sometimes I can't tell if the end is gone, but if it's a male, you'll see that. It's pretty common, especially up where they're digging and working. Anywhere they hang out, there's a lot of this. And there's a lot on the trails now. We see it just hiking on the trail. There's boom, boom, boom. And there's a lot of feathers. They drop so many feathers. So this is the most common we find in the tail. And these are flight feathers, I believe. Find those too. And every once in a while we find these. Now these are body feathers. I guess they're called covert. When you find these are because these are iridescent. These will actually, in the sun, if you put this in the sun, you see rainbows coming out of that. And their whole front of their body does that. It's a phenomenal thing.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, so and we see this every once in a while. The things eat turkey. You see a big old kill site, lots and lots of feathers. And the most likely candidates here, I think, are mountain lions and bobcats. Maybe coyotes. I think they might have a harder time catching a turkey, but I know that the bobcats and the mountain lions like them because I've been able to figure out who ate them once or twice from the tracks.
I think coyotes definitely will feast on turkeys pretty easily.
Yeah, and even if they don't start the feast, they finish it. Because when you find the carcass, the whole carcass, and I go up every week so I can see it, whoever kills it first gets the goodies and just leaves it. And then the coyotes come and carry it around and finish it off. And the only thing that they won't eat is the feet. Apparently those are not good. And these, I have a hard time with these. You get a lot of raven feathers and a lot of crow feathers up there. They're both there. And the ravens especially. And there's just the size, and they say these ravens are more iridescent, especially in the sun. These are more kind of matte black, but other than that, it's just the size. They look kind of similar, but the ravens are just so much bigger than the crows. And I know Sherry's really good at telling these apart. Sherry, how do you do that?
That's just pure luck.
Well, you did really well every time. What do you think, Ann? Do you have a reliable way of telling these?
Size, I think, there's some overlap, obviously. So
Yeah,
I think when they're
that's
going to
the
ask
problem.
on eval, they're going to ask one that's definitely can't be one or the other because
Yeah. It's like this is a 20 centimeters and this one's 20 centimeters. It's like, yeah,
No,
I think if you
I
get
don't think that's the one they're going to ask,
no, this one, I can see him do this one. If you find this, that is one big feather
Sure.
or big old tail feather. So that's all I try to learn, I guess. The red flickers are up there and they leave their little beautiful feathers absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
And you can see them here. And then I added this one in the middle from somebody recommending this from our last Zoom. The body feathers in here have a heart in them like that.
Oh, cool.
I did not know that. It was a birder who told me that. So I went and looked it up, and sure enough, everywhere I found pictures of them.
That's Maggie.
Maggie, yeah, that little heart is there. And I haven't seen that in eval, but I sure hope so. There's a dove nest. It's kind of a mess of sticks. No love is a dove. Is that what you say, Sure?
Yeah, I don't know how the eggs
Right.
even stay.
What?
I don't know how the eggs even stay in there.
It just looks awful.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them around now because there's so many white-winged doves everywhere. Which is probably what this is. We got some in the backyard that look a lot like this.
It's just kind of cool that they put in the minimum effort and they still are so successful.
Yeah, and I don't find a lot of little dead birds out there. Maybe somebody's eating them, but I'm just not seeing a lot of birds that fell out of those nests.
No.
Then we got the sapsuckers, which are pretty common actually. Once you start looking, you find them all over. And these are Williamsons. That's what Maggie has confirmed. They look like that. Um, and they sometimes they do a line, sometimes it goes this way, and sometimes it's just random. Like the whole tree is just like somebody with a shotgun took a shot at it. And another way to tell if you look, there might be some sap in there. That's the point, is to create a little sap well, come back and get that in the bugs that are in it. But this is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. All right. Outside chance of seeing any of these guys. It's just kind of late for them, man. It's late October, maybe a lizard, but the snakes are usually sleeping unless you find one in the sun. And they're not, I don't see a lot of snakes or lizards up there now at all.
You could see an old lizard scat though.
You could. I think we covered that on one of the bosque ones. Yeah. This is the number one cicada. He's not the big guys. He's a little tiny thing. But when they come in, there's thousands of them. They just take, it's like here, some years the Putnams are everywhere. And I've never been able to spot where their holes. They're not as obvious to me as the big ones, but the scars are. This is one of those scars on the bottom, and they absolutely love gamble oak. So if you walk around and find a thin gamble oak, and particularly if it's near a trail or open ground, you look underneath. This is so easy to find. So, and we saw that in the last eval, I think. And bark beetles are everywhere. Got a couple different kinds here. I can't really tell them apart, but this is a very big shallow one, and then this is a little different one. Each one of these this is where they lay the eggs and they take off. And if they want to do it, it's everywhere. And that's the end. All right, if I missed anything, and kudos to everyone who made it to the end of the last one. Yeah, so questions, comments, anything anybody wants to add?
I do have a question for Ann, because more than likely I'm going to be up at the Santa Fe one. Is there much difference between what's up in Santa Fe versus what's down here in Albuquerque?
You mean in the mountains in particular, or just in general?
In general, I mean, both, wherever, because I don't know where they're going to be exactly, but animals I should be looking at that we maybe haven't discussed here in the Albuquerque area.
Just trying to think. I think where we'll be, there's not much difference, but there might be some places where it's more likely we'd find elk, but I don't think where the eval is that is the case. But if it's going to be where we've planned it, yeah.
And you guys have more rabbits still, right? You didn't get hit by the fever?
Not so much. Yeah, we probably have more rabbits than you. That's true at this point, anyway.
Because they're still rare as can be. We couldn't find any the other day.
Right, although we had them on the eval in the spring, but that was their old feeding sign and their old scat, which can really remain a long time on the landscape. So
yeah,
that's probably, yeah, I can't otherwise think of anything in particular that would be different. It's pretty similar.
Thank you.
Yeah. Pretty similar altitude too, right? I mean, mountains around there about the same height?
In the mountains, yeah. In the city, obviously it's lower, but yeah, the mountains. What's the altitude of that trail that you were on, the Ellis?
That's 10,000 feet.
Yeah, I mean, that would be like being up high in the mountains in Santa Fe.
Yeah. But the center's at 7,000, so.
Yeah, the center's like much lower. Yeah. It's kind of in between, higher than Albuquerque, lower than in the Sandias.
Right.
Or at least where it's going to be, yeah.
Now, I've actually seen a ringtail cat up in Santa Fe. Are they somewhat more common there or no?
I wouldn't say that they're common. I would be really uncommon to see their tracks, but they do exist up there. Yeah. I've only seen their tracks like a handful of times, and it's always been by the river, actually not anywhere in Santa Fe, which doesn't mean it's impossible, but it would be highly rare. They're also
same in Albuquerque. I mean, they're just I've never seen a track.
And also the thing is, like, they like to live in the rocks, and they're very lightweight, like lighter than a cat. So for them to make actual tracks, they either have to be in like wet sand by the river or some kind of, once I found their tracks, because I set a track trap by like sifting very fine sand where I knew they were going to be. But otherwise they wouldn't have left tracks there because it was kind of coarse sand. That's why it's real hard to see them. One reason anyway.
Right. If anyone else has questions, if not, then I think we may be done. And this is the final concluding Zoom. Thank God for that. And
Thanks for doing that,
next,
Michael.
yeah, next will be prep days in Albuquerque. For anyone who wants to attend, and all that information will be on the website, and I'll send it out on the emails to everybody. In the meantime, if you have a question or anything comes up, don't hesitate to email me at dukecitytrackheads@gmail.com.
Thanks, Michael. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks for coming. And this will be available on as a recorded Zoom in a couple of days.
Great. Thanks for doing that.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.